In this video, I'm going to show you how to build this Kanban board using React and Tailwind. As you can see, I can add new tasks into each box, delete tasks, or drag them from one to another. We will create this project without using any external libraries, and in this way, you can really understand how it works under the hood. We're gonna start from absolute scratch, and I will walk you through every single line of code. So, let's get into it. So here I have my empty React project with Tailwind inside. As I mentioned at the beginning, we are not gonna use any libraries, so there is nothing to install additionally. We can go straight to coding. First, we're gonna create the logic behind the Kanban board, then we can create the UI for it. So looking at this final version, you can see that we have 3 boxes and we have some tasks in them, and I can move them around, delete them. If you do not select the box that you are going to add this task into, it is going to add the task to the to-do box by default, like this. And if you select it by here, like in progress or done, you can add new tasks to different boxes. So let's analyze the things we need to do. We need 3 boxes with memory, and let me give you an example to explain what memory means. If I start to drag this task, but cancel it without dropping it any other different box, it is going to be back in its original box. And if I drag and drop it inside another box, it is going to get deleted from the original box, and it's going to get added to the target box. So that means these boxes needs to remember which tasks they have inside them, so we can delete the tasks from them when we start to move them around. And we can easily do that by using the useState hook. Also, we're going to need some functions to handle the drag and drop function. As I said, we are not going to use any external libraries, so we are going to implement our own drag and drop functions. Also, we need to add a function to delete the task and add new ones, like this. So now that we know what to do, we can start the code. So we can start by deleting this and turning this into just a empty div. As I mentioned a second ago, first we are going to create the logic, and then we're going to create the UI. To start to create the logic, we can start by creating the 3 boxes, and they are going to be state variables so that they can track the tasks inside them. So we can create a state variable named columns and a setter function for it. Set columns is going to be equal to useState. Now we need to define the initial state of these columns. Also, don't forget to import the useState at the top like this, otherwise it is not going to work. So looking at the final version again, we're going to have 3 boxes, one named to do, one named in progress, and done. We're going to create them as objects, so that's why I opened a set of curly braces. So let's create the first one, to do. The second one is going to be progress, and the final one, done. Each one of these boxes are going to have 2 properties inside: the name, which is to do, and the items. And the items are going to be inside an array. They're going to have IDs and the text inside them. Let's say market research. Let's create another one. The other 2 are going to have the same structure, so we can just copy and paste this. Change this one to in progress. Let's delete one of these tasks and change the ID. Since this is the 3rd task, change the text inside, and this is the final box. And now that we are done with the boxes, we can create the rest of the state variables. You're gonna have 3 more. The first one is going to be for keeping track of the new tasks that are going to be created. So new task, set new task. This one is going to have an initial state of an empty string. The next state variable is going to be named active column, set active column, and it is going to have a initial state of to do. We're going to use this variable when we create new tasks and decide which box that they are going to be in. The initial state is to do because, again, if you take a look at the final version, if I refresh the page, as you can see by default, if you create a new task without changing it from here, the default box that is going to be inside is the to-do box. So that's why we have the initial state of to do here. And the final state variable is going to be dragged item, set dragged item. This one is going to be null. And we're going to use this to keep track of which task is currently being dragged over. So next, we're going to create a function named addNewTask. And obviously, we're going to use this function to create a new task. First, we're going to have this base case. If the input is empty, we are not going to return anything. So new task.trim, if it equals empty, that means the input is empty. So we are just going to return. So creating a new task basically means creating one of these objects and pushing them inside the items array in whichever box you selected. So that means we're going to create a new object and push it inside an array, but we don't want to deal with the original array. So we're going to create a copy of the array that we are going to use. We can create a variable for that named updated columns, and we can use the spread to create a copy of the current existing columns. And we can use this updated columns to access the active column, and we can push the newly created task into it, again using curly braces because we are pushing a object. Let's give it a ID. We can create a simple ID generator using date.now, and we can turn it into a string using toString, and the content is going to be the new task. And after we push the new task inside the active column, we are going to update the state by using the setter function setColumns. And we're going to pass the updated columns, and we can clear the input using setNewTask with empty strings. So we are basically done with this function. The next one is going to be for removing a task. This one is going to take some parameters such as the column ID and the task ID. So just like we did here, we're going to create a copy of the existing current array. And again, just like we did here, we're going to access the active column. And using this updated columns, we're going to access the column ID and its items. The way that we are going to remove an element from this array is we are basically going to filter it out. I will show you what this means in a second. Again, accessing the columns ID and its items, we are going to set it equal to basically the filtered version by the selected item. And we are basically going to delete the item that has a matching ID as the task ID. So this is basically going to create a new array with all the items except the one with the task you have selected. And again, we're going to update the state by using setColumns, and we're going to pass the updated version. And this function is done as well. Let's create the next one, which is going to be handle drag start. Again, we're going to pass the column ID and a item. We're going to use this function to keep track of which of the items are currently being dragged. So for that, we can use the setter function set dragged item, and we can pass the selected column ID and the item. So as soon as you start to drag an item, we basically put the information of the box that you selected that task, and this state is basically going to keep track of it. And we need another function to handle the drag over. For this one, we are just going to pass the event itself, and we're going to use the prevent default on it. So we use this because by default, HTML elements doesn't allow dragging and dropping elements inside them. So by preventing this default behavior, we basically allow the item dragged over on a HTML box that we are going to create. And the next function is going to be for handle drop. Gonna pass the event and the column ID as parameters. This function is going to handle the dropping a task inside a box. And again, we're gonna start by preventing the default behavior. And we're gonna have this base case. If there is no dragged element, we are not going to return anything. Next, we need to extract the information from the dragged item, such as its original column and its ID. We can do it by creating this object, and we can access that information like this by setting the column ID as source column ID and item, and we can set it equal to the dragged item. So there is one more thing we need to handle. Let's say you start to drag a task from the to-do box and you drop it back into the to-do box. So in that case, the function should not return anything, otherwise the task is going to get duplicated. So we can handle that by using this if case. If source column ID is equal to the current column ID, then we are not going to return anything. Next, we're gonna handle the logic for dropping the item into a different box. And you may remember from the analyze we did at the beginning, dragging and dropping a task from one to another basically means removing the task from one box and adding it to another. So again, we're gonna create a copy of the current columns so we can remove and add new tasks into this copy. First, we're gonna delete the element from its original box when you drop it inside another one, and we can actually use the same logic we did here inside the remove task. So using this updated columns, we're gonna access the source column ID and its items, and we're gonna set it equal to this filtered version. Oops, there's a little typo over here. And with this, we have basically did the same thing we did inside this remove task. We have returned a new array without the one element that you selected, which basically means we deleted that element from the array. And after deleting it, we're going to add it to the target column. And we can easily do that by accessing the column ID again. And we can push that item inside the target box. And finally, let's update the state. We can pass the updated columns and set the dragged item back to null. And with this done, we have basically completed all the logic that we are going to need. We can start to create the UI, and we can actually start by creating the column styles. For every box, we're going to have different gradients, such as for the header and as the border color. This one is going to have a background gradient to right from blue 600 to blue 400 and a border of blue 400. The second box is going to have a background gradient to right from yellow 600 to yellow 400 and a border of 400 yellow. And the final box is going to have a background gradient to right as well from green 600 to green 400 and a green border. Now we can style this div as a background. Let's give it a padding of 6 with 100%, and we're gonna make this cover the entire page by setting it to minimum age screen. Let's give it a background gradient to bottom from zinc 900 to zinc 800. This is going to be a flex box, so we can center the elements using item center and justify center. Inside, we're gonna have another container for the Kanban board. It is also going to be a flex container. Center the items. Gonna change the flex direction to flex column and put some gap between them using gap 4 and set the width to 100%. And we're gonna have a maximum width of 6x large. Let's have this H1 that says React Kanban board. Let's make it a lot bigger. Set the font bold, margin bottom 8. Gonna create a text gradient effect. So we're gonna set the text to transparent. Background clip text. And we're gonna set the background gradients to right from yellow 400 via amber 500 to rose 400. Next, we're gonna create another container for the input section. It is going to have a margin bottom of 8, a flex container, width 100% and maximum width large. Gonna have a little shadow, rounded corners, and gonna hide the overflow. Inside, gonna have this input. Type is going to be text. The value is going to be equal to the new task state variable that we have created at the beginning. And as we type into this input, we are basically going to update the new task, and it is going to be get saved inside it. Then we're going to have a onChange event handler, which is going to be set new task, and this setter function is going to basically set the new state as the value. This basically represents the text you write inside this input. Let's create a placeholder as well. Add a new task. It is going to have flex grove and a padding of 3, background zinc 700 and text white. I also want to implement this little function, which is basically going to add the new task once you hit enter on your keyboard. So if the key equals enter, then we're gonna call this function add new task. Right under this input, we're gonna have this select field. You can delete the ID and the name. We're gonna set the value to the active column, and we're gonna change the state using onChange event handler again. And this time we're gonna use set active column, and we're gonna pass the target value. Let's give it a padding of 3, background zinc 700, text white, border 0, and a border on the left. And we're gonna make the border zinc 600. So inside this select box, we are basically going to map the columns that we have. And because this is an object, we can access the object keys, which are basically going to be columns, and we can map over them by column ID. And for every column, gonna create a option. Value is going to be set to column ID. Let's also give it a key as well. We can set it to column ID as well. And inside, we're gonna display the column name. So column ID. So column ID, and we're gonna display the name. And there is a little typo over here. So outside this select box, but still inside this div, gonna have this button that says add, and on click, we're gonna call the add new task. Let's give it a padding on x-axis px6 and a background gradient to right from yellow 600 to amber 500, text white, font medium. And when you hover over it, you're gonna set it to yellow 500 to amber 400. Let's give it a transition as well. Transition duration is going to be 200, and cursor is going to be pointer when you hover over it. So outside this div, I'm gonna create the columns. Let's create another container for that. Let's put some gap between the containers. I'm gonna set the overflow on the x-axis to auto and a padding bottom 6 with 100%. So just like we did inside this select, we are going to access the object keys, columns, and we're going to map over them by the column ID. And for each box, we're going to create a div. We're going to set the key as column ID. To style these boxes, we're going to have dynamic styling. So let's open a set of curly braces and create backticks. We're going to set it to flex shrink 0. With 80, background to zinc 800, rounded corners and a shadow of X large. Gonna have a border at the top, which is going to be 4 pixels. And we're gonna get the color of the column by accessing the column styles array, and gonna pass the column ID, and we're gonna access the border. Now let's create the important parts, which are going to be creating a on drag over event handler and a on drop event handler. So on drag over, we're gonna call the handle drag over function, and we're gonna pass the event and the column ID. And on drop, gonna pass the handle drop function that we have created. Gonna pass the event and the column ID again. And oops, the same typo again. Inside the div, gonna create another one, and this is going to be for the header. Again, we're gonna use dynamic styling, so curly braces and backticks, padding 4, text white, font bold, and text X large. Gonna have rounded corners on the top left and right, so rounded T medium. And we're gonna get the colors from column styles array again, and we're gonna access the header, and you can see the header colors. Inside, we're gonna display the name of the column, so columns column id.name, and we're gonna create this span to display how many tasks inside that box. So columns column id, and we're gonna access the length of the items. Let's style this as well. Margin left 2, px2, py1, background zinc 800. Gonna lower down the opacity to 30, and it is going to be circular, so rounded full, text small, and you can now actually see how many tasks inside these boxes. So right under this div, but still inside this one, we are going to create a little container to display the tasks. Let's create another div, padding 3, and minimum age 64. So first, we're gonna handle the case if there are no tasks to display. So columns id dot items dot length. If it's equal to 0, we are just going to display this div that says drop tasks here. Let's center this text. py10, zinc 500. Let's make it italic and text small. So if there are no items, we are going to display this, and if there are items, then we are going to display the items. So let's map over the array items, and for every element, gonna create a div, gonna set the key, the ID of the item. Let's give it a padding of 4, margin bottom 3, background zinc 700, text white, rounded corners and a little shadow. Gonna set the cursor to move, flex, item center, and justify between. And for the hover effect, gonna give it transform, transition all, duration 200, and when you hover over it, gonna make it just a little bit bigger, and we're gonna increase the shadow as well. Now we gotta set a very important attribute, which is draggable, and on drag start, we're gonna call the function handle drag start, and we're gonna pass the column ID and item. Inside, we're gonna have a span that basically displays the content inside the item, and we're gonna give it a little margin on the right, and right next to it, we're gonna have a button to delete the task. So on click, we're gonna call the remove task, and we're gonna pass the column ID and the item ID. Let's make the text zinc 400. On hover, it is going to be red 400. Transition colors, duration is going to be 200. Width is going to be 6. Height as well. Gonna center the text. It is going to be circular, so rounded full. And when you hover over it, you're gonna change the background color to zinc 600. Let's put this X inside a span. Gonna make it larger. and when you hover over it, cursor is going to be pointer, and that is it. Let's see if everything is working fine. Let's try to drag and drop something, and there you go. We can drag and drop the tasks. The drag and drop function seems to be working fine. We display the task numbers correctly. We have the text drop tasks here if the box is empty. Let's try to add some new ones. We can add new tasks, and we can select which box that we are going to edit inside. Let's see if we can delete them, and deleting tasks seem to be working as well. So this is how we can create this Kanban board using React and Tailwind. I hope you guys find it helpful and enjoyed it. Thank you for your time, and I will see you in the next video.